Everybody, and welcome back to another astrology show here on quantumplanet.world. My name is David Fowle. I'm your host for today. And as always, in these quarterly pieces, today we're going to be looking at the upcoming Capricorn solstice. And it's my great pleasure, and it's somewhat of a tradition now, to be joined by astrologer, author, national treasure, the beautiful, the one and only Pam Gregory. Hola, how are you, sister?
Yeah, great to be with you, David. It's always a joy and a pleasure, and we cover so much ground with so much rich discussion. So, yeah, hello to you and hello to everyone listening.
Brilliant. And, we were just comparing notes. I am sat outside here. It is Mexico, but it is December and it's a little chilly. So if you see me rubbing my hands, it's because I'm keeping myself warm. And Pam was telling me that for those of you back in Blighty, that it's been a little wet, even a little wetter than normal, which is saying something for Britain, right? So
It's been crazy. Yeah, I feel as if I've got webbed feet at this point.
Well, maybe, the inundation of water is a sign of things to come, because for sure, water, I think, is a big part of this solstice, both physically and perhaps emotionally, which of course is what the water element is connected to. So we're going to be covering quite a bit in today's hour-long show. Pam's going to be sharing in a second the astrological chart with a few of the Kuiper belt objects that are playing a part in this very, very powerful solstice. And from my side, I'm going to be weaving in a few of the things I normally bring in, the plants of this time of the year, but also some of the more energetic motifs, and also a little bit about some of the other stars. They're what we might call fixed stars attached to the cosmic history codes, because they're coming through also with another layer of information that is really relevant, I think, for this solstice. And also, I'm just going to mention a little bit about the Mayan wave spell that coincides with the new moon, which comes up in a couple of days, and actually somewhat sets the tone for a 2-week period that encapsulates the solstice. So I know that Pam did a show on the new moon the other day, very good, watched it, loved it, made lots of notes, but it seems to me that we're now into a process, Pam, that's going to take us through to the end of the year. So do you have anything you'd like to say to preface today's show and where you're going to take us with this chart?
Yeah, huge times. And I think the energy has already shifted in December. Many people are feeling that. We've shifted out of a lot of the really dense intensity. And this is, of course, the setup for 2024, which will be a historic year. A massive year of change, of collective awakening. We will look back on 2024 and think, wow, that was a year like no other. And so much has happened in that year to get us to a very different place. So this Capricorn solstice, which of course is like striking a tuning fork for the next 3 months. It's almost like I think of it like the first layer of paint on the canvas.
Right.
Of what's coming up over the next 3 months, over which we overlay all the transits, the lunations, the eclipses, etc. But think of it like the sort of the backdrop energy, the first layer of paint on the canvas. So yeah, this is the setup for a very different year.
Right, I know I was watching your new moon video with intrigue, and you said something similar, but also that November had been very energetically what was the word you used, charged maybe, or active, and that December is quite a different piece, and I would already agree with that. We're only 8 days into December, and the energetic shift is palpable. But we've also been through quite a bit with the cosmos. We had a lot of solar flares about a week ago. Passing through an active part of the photon belt. So I think many of us have been feeling sort of up and down energy, sort of feeling elated, perfect, I've made it, feel really clear, only for a few hours later to sort of be at the opposite end of the spectrum, go, I'm not sure what I'm doing, don't feel clear at all, what on earth is going on, what am I doing here? But I feel that energy is starting to somewhat even out. The waves maybe are becoming a little more calm, and it's easier to find respite, peace, and grounding and centering, all of which I think is really important as we enter this phase until the end of this year. So do you want to bring up the chart, Pam, and we'll get into it and have a look at it? I know we've got a lot to talk about today, and
we've got a lot to go. And just to sort of add on to that, David, I think inevitably what you've been saying there about the changeability of the energy, we're going to see that big time in 2024, because it's, as I've used the analogy before, boiling a pan of water. There's so much change is coming in that with the high frequency energy, inevitably that's going to cause great turbulence and chaos at the lower levels, because it's breaking it up, it's dissolving it. It's the law of physics, downward causation. So that has to happen, and it's happening within a very, very short space of time relative to history, relative to thousands of years of the system we've lived in. it is going to be turbulent. It is going to be chaotic. So just know that and prepare yourself up front. It can't not be. We have to smash out the old kitchen cupboards before we can put in the new ones. So
Right.
off we go, because I know, as you say, David, we've got an awful lot to talk about here. So let me put the chart up.
Yeah, and for our audience, we were talking about this before we jumped on to record today, and comparing our notes on where we think we're at and where we think we're heading to, and basically coming to much the same conclusions as we pretty much always do, but just putting some slightly different nuances and imagery and symbology into the picture for everybody to work with. Because, you know, I think like many of the notable festivals that we have in our modern world, Pam, they've got hijacked into being more about consumerism and distraction. And this is a really powerful point of the year, the Capricorn solstice, as indeed all of the equinoxes and solstices are. They're a point where the elemental energies of Mother Earth change. And we're now changing from going into the very depths of the earth. This is the final point of the descent into the dark, into the womb, into the void space on the solstice. And then after the sort of 3 days of darkness, when the sun seemingly doesn't rise above the horizon, we have the return of the light, as beautifully depicted in places like Newgrange and many of these sort of stone beehive structures of the ancestors, when the first light comes back. But that first light is the solar spark of what's going to ignite our year. And I think that we're going to see more about how this is going to play out through the astrology this year too. So where are you going to start our little journey around this Capricorn solstice, Pam?
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Well, as always, I said this for England because this is where I live. So ignore the houses, ignore the clock face. We're just looking at where the planets are falling in the signs and their aspects to each other. I haven't actually put all of the aspect lines in because it'd be such a blizzard, you wouldn't be able to read anything, but I'll talk you through it. I think to start, obviously with the sun, because that defines the Capricorn solstice when the sun enters Capricorn, which happens in the UK. It'll happening in the US on the 21st. It's happening in the UK on the 22nd. And so we see the sun with Mercury very tightly conjunct here. And the sun and Mercury are trine to the moon and Jupiter. And therefore the moon is also conjunct Jupiter. And this is wonderfully expansive, wonderfully expansive. You know, think of that rolling mantra, I'm welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. That's a very good mantra if you can't think of anything better to keep falling back on. But it also is very grounded, because here we've got Sun and Mercury in Capricorn, Moon, which is exalted, by the way, in Taurus. It's about fertility, growing things, and Jupiter. So it's very much about expansion, but also being grounded, that connection to the earth that you were just talking about, David, that's so important. And more of us, I think, in this expansion, evolution, ascension, this expansion of consciousness that we're going through, we're not expanding away from the earth, we are becoming more connected to her in the way that many of the dwarf planets are suggesting, such as Homer, with Homer's deep shamanic connection to the earth. We're becoming more aware of our interconnection with all living beings, and that includes the earth too. So that I see a beautiful, beautiful double trine there. And also what's helpful here is that Saturn is actually sextile on one side, the sun and Mercury, and on the other side, sextile the moon, and just about sextile conjunct Jupiter. So this is quite a stabilizing factor. You know, it's like having those kind of, what do you call them, stabilizing wheels on a kid's bike. It's because there's going to be so much going on energetically around about this time, and also going into 2024, that is giving us, again, more stability. Saturn rules Capricorn. So with Capricorn and Taurus highlighted, and also Saturn in that double sextile, that is actually, I think, another positive aspect here, particularly because the moon is exalted in Taurus. And we also have the dwarf planet I've mentioned before, Chaos. Generally, the dwarf planets have around about a 300-year orbit. Directly opposite, I mean, it's within minutes of an exact opposition to Mercury, but also to the sun. Remember that the myth of chaos was that heaven was ripped from earth, but the purpose of chaos is to reunite heaven with earth. Beautiful. And I think that is where we are headed in this current trajectory of the next few years, I would say. Mm-hmm. Also, the sun is sextile to Homer. The moon is opposing Homer, and Saturn is actually trine to Homer. So some very positive aspects here to Homer. I'd even count that opposition to the moon, because the moon is so well situated in Taurus as being very positive. So Homer, just to remind you of the myth, she's an incredibly powerful symbol for New Earth. She's very connected to regeneration, turning your age back, birthing babies from all over her body. So she's very connected to be able to regenerate the earth, even when it's laid waste. She could always summon wild food from the land with her magic stick, the Macaulay, even when it appeared to be desolate. And so, and in her fire goddess expression, she was said to birth the islands of Hawaii. So we have this powerful warmth, and I think she's very connected to regenerative medicine, stem cell medicine, very much because she's in Scorpio, and Scorpio is linked to medicine, particularly anything that's diagnostic or piercing. You know, the injections I had in my knee with my own blood plasma of stem cells, that's been remarkable. That kind of stem cell regeneration is going to become a bigger and bigger part of medicine as well, but very much a powerful symbol for New Earth. So that is another positive. We are seeing some very strong energy for freedom here. We have Mars in a very tight quincunx to Uranus. Any Mars-Uranus aspect is linked to an urgent need for freedom, particularly when Mars is in Sagittarius, the sign very much linked to freedom, independence, don't box me in, don't tell me what to do. Uranus, as we know, is the maverick, the antidote almost to Saturn. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go my own way. I'm an individual. I'm going to break through. So, and this is also about a breakthrough in belief systems. That's going to be highlighted even more in April with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on the 20th, 21st. This is like a breakdown and a breakthrough in belief systems. They may be religious or they may be social and cultural. We're going to see 10 tons of that as we go through 2024. But the urgent desire for freedom and recognition for individual rights, individual because it's Mars, individual because it's Uranus, is going to be very strong. And that's one of the big, big themes of this solstice and going into 2024. That is reinforced by this very long running, which I've talked about a great deal, Eris conjunct the North Node. Very, very gradually as we move through the early months of 2024, because the nodes always move backwards, that is going to start to separate. But it's been incredibly strong up to now and continues to be operational. So Eris, warrior sister of Mars, fights for freedom, fights for truth, fights for justice, fights for a fairer society. It's conjunct the collective path of soul's growth. So very, very clear message, as it was really through the year, of the way we've got to go is truth, justice, honesty, greater equality. And that's the message of Uranus as well, always. They're very similar. So those are the strong demands for freedom. However, we may also be seeing some financial turbulence. Certainly Uranus long-term in Taurus until fully 2026, doesn't fully leave Taurus till 2026, is about a radical change in the financial and economic system, currencies, values of currencies, for sure. But it's particularly energized now because Venus, that rules Taurus, is in Scorpio, and Taurus, Scorpio, represents the financial axis. And so here with Uranus opposing Venus, yes, on the one hand, it's about establishing more independence and freedom in your relationships. It's also potentially about some volatility coming up financially. So that will be no surprise if that happens. Another thing to point out is Mars here is square to Neptune. And I see that as actually really lovely in terms of this is about spiritual action. And spiritual action can be you go and help on the soup run or at the food bank, or spiritual action can be yoga, tai chi, qigong, breathwork, that kind of spiritual action. But nevertheless, it is helping to reinforce a spiritual context for whatever happens at this solstice moving into 2024, because we have this long running all through 2024 square between Neptune and the galactic center and Vada. Vada will be conjunct that galactic central next year. And Vada, remember, with her husband Manwë, who is at the creator degree, the very first degree of the zodiac here, they, in the creation myth, were responsible for creating the cosmos. Vada's role in it was to place the sun, the moon, the stars in the heavens and set them on their course. So she is again a powerful symbol for creating new Earth. She did it the first time, she can do it the second. So interesting that not only is she conjunct the galactic center, where all this raw plasma pours out, this crystalline plasma with which we create our world, and it will have a spiritual context and impetus square to Neptune, but also the fact that her husband in the creation myth, Manwë, is at 0 degrees of Aries. I mean, that is a super clear message of, again, a whole new birth of who we are as humanity and of new Earth. The other thing to point out before I move more fully to the dwarf planets is Pluto is at this anaretic degree. Now, the anaretic degree is 29 degrees of a sign. And what tends to happen at the anaretic degree is that it tends to express the more shadow side of that sign. So what is Capricorn about? Capricorn is about top-down control, rules and regulations, top-down power. You know, we've had 10 tons of that over the last 3 years in particular. And although by transit, Pluto doesn't move out of Capricorn until the 20th of January and re-enter Aquarius at that point, nevertheless, we've got this backdrop, because it's at 29 degrees of Capricorn here at the solstice, this backdrop of greater attempted control, power over and control over the population. And so be aware that may happen, but as I mentioned in a recent video, it's more and more like the hollow, skinny wizard behind the curtain, because more and more people are waking up. Big year of collective awakening in 2044. And here, with it being square to the moon, an out of sign square, but nevertheless a very tight square to the moon in mundane astrology is the people, the population. And whenever you get hard aspects between the moon and Pluto, it's about intense or extreme emotions being felt. What are those intense or extreme emotions about? Well, they could be about changes in the financial system, Taurus, about our sense of safety and security needs, but also just in general about the greater attempted power over us or control over us. So that may not be sitting that well with the people because it's a square. And then if we start to move to some of the dwarf planets, I love the dwarf planets because they just shift stuff to a different level. We have Ixion here, tightly conjunct Mercury in particular, but also the Sun. Ixion in myth, you may remember, in his negative expression, did not behave well. He murdered his father-in-law. He was thrown out of heaven. Zeus then gave him a second chance. He then tried to rape Zeus's wife Hera, and at that point was put on a burning wheel and spun off into eternity. So, it's zero remorse, zero moral compass. So he's not worried about killing people in his negative expression. And I think that is very interesting indeed for where we sit in society right now. However, in his positive expression, he is about going your own way, finding bliss through joy and simplicity. And I'm going to actually read some words from Alan Clay here. So I must credit Alan Clay. He runs the Dwarf Planet University, as many of you know. And he is discovering, and I'm quoting from him, that Ixion is related to seeker consciousness, developing our authenticity and following our bliss. Ixion is the wild child. I really like that. That brings bells to me. Wild child. Independence of spirit and are these rules we are playing by the right ones? That's from Alan Clay. Are the rules that we are playing by the right ones? So challenge to, such clear themes here of the urge for freedom, the urge to do your own thing, of your inner sense of power and authenticity versus, the old world, the old order. So also to highlight Gong, or it's pronounced Gong Kun here at 4 degrees of Pisces. This is going to be conjunct. Gong actually has an orbit of 551 years, almost identical to Eris, whereas the other dwarf planets are around about 300. Saturn is going to be conjunct Gong Kun until kind of mid-February. And Gong Kun in myth was the Chinese water dragon god. Interesting because we're moving into the year of the wood dragon, a lot more dragon energy coming up for us. And in myth, Gong Kun was said to be very angry because he didn't win the throne. And in his anger, he kind of hit his head against the Buzu mountain. And in doing so, he actually changed the Earth's axis. That's very interesting, I think. So he's very connected. Again, Alan Clay is saying this, connected to turning points. And I think that's very interesting, as I'm seeing 2024 as a year of pivot points. He's very linked to flooding, but also the management of the floods. We could do with a bit of that in the UK right now. But again, Alan Clay is saying it isn't just literal flooding, it's the amount of emotion that we will be feeling at this, the weightiness of emotion, Saturn conjunct Gong Kun. And so I think this is very, very powerful. Alan Clay is seeing Saturn there as some kind of, restriction or limitation on people's emotions. Alan Clay is seeing it much more as the need for empathy and connection to all other living beings through our emotions. Don't cut off, Saturn, your emotions. Do not cut them off. Feel connected emotionally to every other living being, because that's where we're headed in New Earth. The recognition, everything is connected, we are all part of one consciousness, which is something
I think that's a lot of what Saturn in Pisces is going to teach us, though, Pam, is about that. And that's why we're getting these as sort of initial hits, because we've both been talking about water a lot. And I know you've been interviewing quite a few people and getting lots of different intel. And I think that water is going to be important. And I'm going to share a little bit about one of the stars coming through on the sun, which is also connected to the emotions in the water. So I think that we're really being encouraged to get our emotions under control. And of course, from a fifth dimensional point of view, we don't get emotionally triggered. That's a fourth dimensional kind of journey. That's our human emotional, even pain body. The lower astrals are often where those things occur. And so I think that we are being encouraged to lift ourselves out of those lower frequencies by getting our emotions under control. And it doesn't mean that we can't necessarily, not have feelings about things or not care about things, but it's whether we allow ourselves to get triggered by them. And we're living in a moment in society where huge trigger points are being, let's say, delivered to us for us to consider. And of course, people are getting triggered by them, but that in the end leads to division and polarity, which is also, I think, a big part of this solstice. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing Gong Kun as compassion, actually, rather than being triggered. It's compassion, so you have a sense of unity with other beings. And just to finish off, and I'll let you speak, David. Just with Sedna, and I've mentioned this before because Sedna is so slow moving as well, 11,400 year orbit. Sedna is in a pretty much exact trine to Pluto. Even when Pluto tips into Aquarius and Sedna tips into Gemini, they are still in this trine. They're going to be in that dance, holding hands in that trine all through next year. And both of them, of course, are about transformation. Or Nancy Rebecca, from her communication with the blue light beings, would say metamorphosis. And Sedna's myth actually is about total metamorphosis. That one of the deep meanings of both Pluto and Sedna moving out of earth signs into air is let go. Remember, Sedna was hanging on to the boat with her fingers, trying to get back in the boat in the storm, and her wonderful patriarchal father, symbol of the patriarchy, chopped her fingers off and her body floated down to the deep to to metamorphize, if that's the verb, transform into these beautiful sea creatures. So it's a question of letting go of what we thought was security, Taurus, Capricorn, the old financial system, the old earthly ways we've lived our lives, and trusting in this complete metamorphosis for humanity, that we are shifting into the light body and shifting into a whole different state of being for which there is no dress rehearsal. But it's a level of trust in the astrological symbols and in the physics and cosmology of light of what we are currently experiencing right now on this whitewater rafting ride.
Yeah, and perhaps in Britain it's literally a white water rafting ride at the moment, even possibly outside of your front door, from what you were telling me earlier, Pam. So it sounds as though you need Gong Kung to take up a position in the current British cabinet, maybe, to get on top of these things, because I would dare to say that the current government is not doing that. So anyway, I think what you've laid out there is very, very interesting, and actually largely concurs with my own deep dive on the chart for this solstice in preparation for today's talk. And I'd like to start by just looking at things from slightly different perspectives, but in through the filter of what you've just talked about. So the first place I'd like to start is with the Sun and Mercury conjunction, which is obviously very powerful. And I want to bring in 3 other stars that are coming from the sort of, you can say the more fixed star, but it's really the cosmic history codes of the stellar nations. And what these are sort of more connected to our soul's DNA and places that our soul has perhaps traversed through on its long journey to get to this particular incarnation. But they also tell of a galactic history that plays out through the constellations, and some are more well known than others. And I'm going to share just a few here and there, just to add another element, which I think really reinforces what you've been talking about. So the first 3 stars I'm just going to mention them very briefly, are called Nashuba, a 1 degree 36 of Capricorn. And this actually is a star that's very much sitting in the arrow of Sagittarius, of the centaur. And so this star really brings through an energy of about how to direct your arrow, your intentions, we can say. And where are we pointing that arrow of truth at? And, you know, I think we're being asked to make sure that our energy is focused, but also this arrow carries the energy of creativity and about how to dream bravely. And I think that this is very much what this time of year is about, is entering into the void space, the womb of the 3 days between the solstice and the return of the light. Very, very symbolic. And I'll maybe chat a little bit more about that in a minute. But where is our arrow going? And I think that this is where we're sort of being asked now, like, it's like you said, another choice or pivot point. Am I shooting my arrow back into the melee of Christmas shopping and turkey and and queues and getting slimed in the supermarket waiting for my chocolate advent calendar, or whatever we're doing over Christmas, and watching reruns of Indiana Jones and Star Wars, all of which is great, but it's somewhat distracting us away from the possibility that we have at this time of the year, which is to shoot that arrow deeply into the void, into the womb space, to all it is, to creative source, to great spirit, and say, this is my coherence. This is my coherent plan for myself, and this is what I'm wishing for. So that's the first star, which I think is highly relevant, coming through this sun gate on the Capricorn solstice with Mercury, also communication somehow, but it's also conjunct a star called Spiculum, very, very tight at 1 degree 17 of Capricorn. And this is really a star connected to what we would call the Bear Nation, which is about the Christ consciousness, very connected to the Southern Cross, the Crew constellation, which sits actually in Scorpio. But this is really just a star in its energy that is reminding us about our cosmic human nature, that actually really and truly in our true origin, we were always cosmic humans, and we've got disconnected. And this sort of time of year is about bringing that remembrance back to ourselves. This return of the light is, I think, for me, very much symbolized by the totemic sword of light of Archangel Michael, and connected to our divinity, our crown chakra, our soul star chakra, and whether we're connected to that divine part of ourselves that holds the divine blueprint of who we truly are. And this sort of leads into the question of divine will versus free will. And divine will is really what we came here to do, and free will is our opportunity to not do that, or to not do that and then come back to remembering that. So I think this is a very interesting sort of thing to hold as a as a mantra or meditation point is my divine will versus my free will. And of course, the whole fall of the angels and Lucifer was about giving us the opportunity to stray away from our divine path by doing whatever we want, which, you know, can be a lot of fun, but can also get us into a fair amount of trouble that racks and stacks the karma. So, you know, these are some of the backdrops coming through, but I think that we're being urged to remember that we are so much more than just this 3D body, right? And that we are at all times connected to all levels of our multidimensional sense of being, and that David is just one face and Pam is just one face of a very, very extensive being, oversoul being, that is possibly having multiple experiences on multiple timelines all at once, but we are still experiencing them all here and trying to make sense of them, which I think is part of the mystery of the universe. But you know, the other interesting star that kind of lends credence to what you were saying about Gong-kun is a star called Etamin that actually sits on the galactic, roughly on the galactic center at 28 degrees of Sagittarius, and this is really connected to the dragons, the elemental warrior yang beings of the universe, who actually protect divine will. That is their role in the universe. The dragons protect divine will, and they're sort of the great felines, the jaguar lineages, the shamanic lineages, very connected to the goddess. They protect free will as it comes through the goddess. So this particular star is really connected to the elemental energy of the water dragons and is reminding us to have our emotions under control as we remember our cosmic self, so that we can shoot that arrow from the bow of the centaur into the womb space and actually start to think clearly about what are our mission codes, each and every one of us. Moving forwards, not just to be a 3D in the humdrum hamster wheel or being led and guided even by other narratives, but saying, hold on a second, I'm a sovereign being and I have my own divine codes that I came here with for a mission that I need to fulfill. And so I think this is really what we're setting up here is the best Christmas present ever that we could deliver to ourselves is the remembrance of who we truly are and all of the gifts that we truly carry as cosmic beings. And that is what we have the opportunity to do this time every single year, because we have this beautiful womb space, these 3 days of darkness in the depths of the void, waiting for the fire spark of the sun to come back and actually give that fire energy to our 5D dreams, but to bring them to manifest in 3D. And I think everything you've been talking about is a reminder of like, okay, we've been through a lot, our emotions, our emotional field has got jangled, charged, slimed, everything. But where am I right now? Am I able to come back to my center, to ground myself, maybe to sit and be like the tree, you know? And I think it's interesting on this Capricorn solstice, according to some, we can say sort of Druidic mythology, but really I think coming a lot from the author William Graves, is this idea of the handing over of the kingship from the holly tree to the oak tree, the king of winter to the king of summer. And I think that it's a powerful kind of reminder of the energy of nature and its shift. And you know, the evergreen tree provides the light that takes us into the darkness, and then the oak tree, which is very, very solar, very much connected to the Druids, who are a solar order, is reminding us that the light is coming back and is going to continue to come back and increase, right, for the next 6 months. So we have this opportunity to work with ever increasing light to fuel our dreams. So I just wanted to bring that in and give it another layer, because it's just interesting how even the bigger astronomy cosmology still supports, as everything does in the interconnected web of life, you know, as woven by Great Mother Spider. And I think what's really beautiful at this time of year also is that we're reminded very much of the yew tree. It's very connected to this time of year. And in the Norse traditions, the yew tree is Yggdrasil. And at the bottom of Yggdrasil sit the three Norns, or the three weavers of the web, the three fates we can call them, and we can connect with all of these energies, past, present, and future, as our own sort of mother spider energy to weave our web, but also to remind ourselves that we are connected to a much bigger web that is the interconnected web of life, as woven by Great Mother Spider, who in essence is another, we can say, manifestation of the goddess energy coming through from the fifth dimension of unconditional love. So I think this is a very beautiful setup that we have here. And all that's being asked of us, Pam, is to take some time to sit and be quiet, and maybe give 3 days to ourselves, enough self-love to say, hey, I'm going to sit for 3 days and not get involved in the rat race of Christmas, but I'm going to give that time to myself, maybe make a nice space in my house, maybe make a little Christmas altar, maybe have a nice fire burning. I'm going to talk a little bit about Vesta in a minute, because she's not on your chart, but she has a very powerful opposition actually to the sun. She sat at 29 degrees of Gemini. And Vesta is really about, about many things, as you will know, of course, but really about that inner flame and tending the inner flame of our lives, and making sure that the flame doesn't get extinguished. Because if the flame gets extinguished, then I think we're in a little bit of trouble, right? So does that make sense, Pam? I'm just bringing in a few little flavors.
Absolutely, yes. It's very rich, actually. It's wonderful, and I love Vesta. There's a kind of purity about that inward focus. Keep the flame burning, and I think she kept the flame burning in the Roman temples, as I remember. And there was a whole lineage that you could never let the flame go out. And I think that's a beautiful symbol as we enter 2024. Just keep that, and you might even imagine that that flame is in your heart.
Exactly.
The light in your heart that you just keep focusing on. You bring yourself back to that, breathe in and out of that flame in your heart, and just know that that we are born for these times. We are meant to go through this dizzying speed of evolution at these times. It isn't just jolly bad luck and random. It is a divine plan that's unfolding.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, and that also reminds me just to say to everybody that each and every one of us actually signed up to be here in this time. And so everything that we are experiencing is something that we decided we would do. And there's nobody else to blame for that. That's part of self-responsibility and accepting that I decided to be here. And I think that's a really important eagle's perch, fifth dimensional perspective that somehow can make some things that seem really terrible actually okay. Because, even down here in duality, we see this sort of good and bad, light and dark, this sort of eternal tussle. But really and truly, it's just two sides of the same coin, as the Buddhists would say. And as I remember learning as a good Buddhist student many moons ago, that is the nature of duality. And the trick is to step back from that, or to lift ourselves very scorpionic style to the eagle's perch and take the overview and say, well, this is all a very interesting game and story, or theatre production, as I know you used to say, but what's it really all about? And the sort of, that's where the divine will versus free will comes back in, is that I'm here to remember who I truly am so that I can step into my fullest sense of being, so that I can be everything I need to be for myself and everyone around me, and maybe even for the collective, right? And for sure, Pam, you've been, I think, fulfilling your mission codes for quite some time, keeping us all on the straight and narrow with the mundane astrology. And we all have a different role to perform in these times. And I think that's really important. So as I was saying, one of the interesting things about Vesta at this time is that it's also conjunct a couple of other interesting stars, which maybe some of your audience, Pam, already know. Actually, they're called Polaris and Betelgeuse. Yep. They're interesting for a couple of reasons, but mostly they're places where in the galactic history, various, inverted breaches occurred. And there was, let's just say, some sort of galactic situations. And Betelgeuse was actually got breached by the dragons a long, long time ago. And the dragons, on a lower note, also can also explain ego and the misuse of power. So Betelgeuse has that trauma, and Polaris actually was also somewhat infiltrated, we can say, by the fallen arthropods, those beings who create the AI technology and, the more inverted aspects of Great Mother Spider, which create the Matrix. So we've got these two beautiful, powerful stars. Betelgeuse is really a place where the galactic codes were always held, a bit like a sort of a version of the Akashic Records, actually, which is why those other nations wanted to enter there. But what we're understanding is that those two stars are very close to each other, and they're offering the energy of polarity, of the possibility of divine connection, of the Akashic records, of cosmic codes, but then of the inversion of a breach. And I think that that's something really interesting, because it's coming through the filter of Vesta into this moment, where we're being asked to also tend our sacred fire, but also understand the pitfalls of polarity, and making sure that we're kind of, I guess, walking the more Buddhist middle path and not falling into polarity, because there is a lot of polarity and division in our world at this time. And there's actually one more star called Menkalim, which is at 015 of Cancer. So this is also all conjunct chaos, by the way. So we've got these energies, and that star's really just asking for, it's a stellar sanctuary where we can ask for the manifestation of divine truth. So when we're trying to be in our discerning self to ascertain about polarity, we can work with this other energy that sits there. So it's all coming through at the same time through the filter of Vesta, but also through chaos, which, as you said, is about bringing heaven down to earth. So we've got these kind of inputs here that are showing us and shaping our container for us about how we can start to hold those energies within ourselves. And as you said, I think that the inner flame is really the heart, and the heart is the direct conduit to our fifth dimensional self of unconditional love, which is, again, we can say that the fifth dimension really is heaven. It's a place where everything is okay, and we can see all horizons without the division of polarity that duality gives us. So I just think it's interesting that we've got this very, very strong energy coming through the sun on this Capricorn solstice. It sort of backs up what the astrology says, really. So
absolutely. It has
yeah.
the potential. I think it certainly has the potential, David, of seeing things from a much more expanded point of view, and as we move through 2024, a much more multi-dimensional point of view. We're going to be seeing things from being galactic citizens. We're going to be looking at our tiny contracted 3D existence and thinking, my goodness, how could I have lived with that when it was all so small? Is the sense I get. And this is the tipping point, the pivot point that we're going to move into right now.
Right, exactly. And I think that, we've got all of these really powerful energies, really positive aspects and trines that you talked about. So I feel that this whole period, Pam, is about us getting clear. And I think that the run up, the sort of the descent into the darkness is really our opportunity to go inwards. And I think it's interesting this time of year is mushroom season, it's fungi season, and a large part of their job in nature is to break down and to compost. And I think that that's really what this whole period is sort of moving from the earth energy we're currently into the air energy, which is sort of the composting, going into the belly of the great mother. But then as the energy comes with the sun, we're going more to our air elemental, which is more about the mind, more about the higher dimensional thinking. So we're going to utilize that energy to propel us forwards into 2024 so that we can really embrace all of the things that you've been talking about. And, I thought 2023 was a bit rock and roll, as you would say, definitely a bit up and down and challenging. But coming to the end of the year, I feel that the energy has kind of evened out, has become more grounded, and I think that it's really beautiful that we're going to be moving into the energy of the oak tree, who I think is the master of ceremonies of holding space for not only himself but many other beings too. And when we see an oak tree in the wild, we can often see a very, very clear sphere of influence that one tree has, and then we see other trees growing out of the oak tree, and we see many different birds and animals living in the tree. And in the true traditions of the land and of Mother Earth, the king was decided by the witches, the three Norns, not because he had the biggest bank balance or the nicest car or the best looking castle, but because he was worthy in himself, because he was already enough. He already understood that I am enough. I do not need to take on the role of kingship to take from the people whatever I can, which is something that kingship became in much later times. But I am enough. And not only am I enough to support myself, but I can support others too. So I think in many ways we're being encouraged to think and be like the king of summer, the oak, which is the energy which is sort of incoming. So I think this is where the sort of the blend of the pagan and the multidimensional cosmic selves come to fruition at this time of year, and we can connect deeply down into the earth through connecting with trees like the yew tree or the oak or the holly, but also with connecting to our more cosmic selves through the reading of the astrology charts. Or, myself and my guide, Leslie Shankman, we did a similar piece to this, but working with the cosmic codes as a Capricorn solstice preview, which actually you can check out on our YouTube channel. So if you find that sort of more cosmic expansion resonating, then please do check that out. But I think we're being very much guided to go into our heart space and tend that internal flame and dream big, Pam. That's what I'm feeling for this Capricorn solstice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this isn't a dress rehearsal. We are going, and although there's a lot of grounding here, and I'd really encourage people to earth and ground their feet on the earth, weather permitting, as often as you can. Because 2024 will get fast right from the beginning of the year, out of the traps. It's going to be fast. So it's good at this Capricorn solstice. We've got some grounding available, but do physically, practically put bare feet on the earth, bare feet on the grass as often as you can. And just to echo what you were saying about that story about the king, integrity is mega important. Spiritual integrity, Saturn in Pisces. Integrity is going to be incredibly important as one of the pillars, one of the qualities by which we can access higher dimensions. If you're not in integrity, that's not going to happen for you. It's never going to work because you're not ringing true, as it were.
Right, and I just want to introduce it again. I've been delving into the world of astro.com and 144,000 asteroids or whatever it is they've got listed there. So I've been having a bit of fun with that. And I just want to pull out just something that made me chuckle a little bit, which is Dionysus, the god of wine and fertility and generally having a damn good time at Christmas and pretty much whenever else you can, is actually conjunct Neptune in Pisces. There is an asteroid named after Dionysus. And so, yeah, I thought, well, that's interesting. Dionysus conjunct Neptune in Pisces. That sounds like possibly a little bit of inebriation at some point over Christmas. But the reason I bring that in is because it's, also called Bacchus in the Roman traditions. But with the energy of the goddess, which is something I just want to take a few minutes to talk about now, if I may. The goddess is often about fertility and about these kind of more celebratory processes. And often there is some sort of element of alcohol involved. I had a very interesting experience at a temple in Mexico where I met a guy who energetically opened a space for a pulque ceremony so the goddess could come in because she would oversee pulque ceremonies, which were connected to fertility and abundance. And that was part of the Azteca way of doing things. And Dionysus is kind of a similar character by his godlike connection with wine. He's very much about inebriation. But as we enter this this final period of the year, we have this Mayan wave spell, which goes every 13 days. And I'm just going to take a minute just to explain a little bit about these, because they're part of the Mayan calendar, the 1320 calendar, which goes every 13 days as opposed to the 1260 more Gregorian calendar. And many of us have got used to using these, Pam, through the immersions that we've been doing over at Quantum Plant Healing. And what's interesting is that every 13 days they repeat themselves, but because there's 20 different glyphs, they start on a different glyph and have a different flavor and feeling each 13 days. So once we get into this kind of rhythm, we can start to work with these energies of each glyph at the beginning. So the first day of any wave spell is the kind of the predominant energy that you're going to follow. And you can work with those in conjunction with astrology for basically healing and manifestation. Incredibly powerful because they give you a natural 13-day container, which always follows the same sort of principles. So day one is always about intention. Day two is about polarity. Day three about service, and so on and so on. Balance, attunement, integration. And then we come to day 10, which is always day it's always day of manifestation. So this particular wave spell starts on the new moon on the 12th of December with the energy or the glyph of the red skywalker, which is really about the time-space explorer and our connection to our multidimensional selves. But the Skywalker carries the number 13 in the glyph, and the 13 is the goddess. It's in being in service to the goddess. So this is a glyph that speaks of being able to traverse multidimensional sense of being, but always in service to the goddess and always being a conduit and a channel for that energy to come through. And a lot of the energy of the goddess is about fertility and the sowing seeds and dreams. So we've been given this opportunity, bookended by this new moon on the 12th and the full moon on the 26th, with this perfect 13 days in between. And day 10, day of manifestation, is the solstice. And the wave spell itself finishes on the 24th, which is the return of the light. So I just want to share that because these powerful containers give us a way to work with the energies that you've just talked about and I've just talked about a bit too through the astrology, but understanding, wow, I can work with all of these energies to blend a very fertile womb space for myself to plant my own seeds. So I just want to share that because I think that that's really exciting. And I think that this is part of the transition to a more multidimensional way of thinking and being. It's like these glyphs and wave spells are going on a bit like astrology every single moment of every day, whether we're paying attention to them or not. But what we can do if we're smart is we can start to work with them and understand, okay, so this glyph, this wave spell is about the goddess. It's about abundance. It's about multidimensional connectivity. How am I working with that energy and my astrology to make that work for me? And we can do this with every single 13 days, which is basically a moon cycle, right? So I think that we're being encouraged as we move into 2024 to start being more cosmic, but staying grounded and centered to the earth at the same time. And that may seem a little bit kind of like, oh, like, how do I do both? Well, I think that's part of becoming a cosmic human, is how do we stay grounded into 3D, but open like the oak tree with its big branches, which are like semiconductors. The oak tree is a tree that can conduct lightning, but it's also a tree that can connect us to our cosmic origins, our cosmic DNA, our cosmic ancestors, but its roots go down deep into the earth and connect us deeply to Mother Earth, but also the inner earth beings. And so we stand here in the middle world of the 3D, connected above and below. all we have to do is get clear in our central channels, which is where the plant mullein comes in. Now, mullein is a plant very much connected to the sword of light and connected to the crown chakra, but he is reminding us at this time of year to get clear in our central channel of light so that we can be like the oak tree, channeling down all the way through into the roots, so that our toroidal field, our energetic field is actually a toroidal field, is fully flowing. And, you know, interestingly, in ancient geomancy, they often used to indicate life with a circle and a dot in the middle, which we now understand is another sort of visual aerial representation of us as a toroidal field. We are the dot in the middle, but we are surrounded by the circle, which is the perimeter of our field. Very much like the oak tree, he shows us very viscerally how to be like a tree. So I just wanted to share some of these motifs because, you know, we are organizing something that we talked about earlier, right, Pam, coming up, which is called the Return of the Light, which I know, looping back to when we first started, was something that you supported, myself and now my partner Bella in with Quantum Plant Healing, which is creating energetic journey spaces or containers, we can say, that bring all of these influences in, and they're all woven together. In this case, a bit like it's a bit like having a Christmas tale told to you at the fireplace. So we have these 13 days, and each 13 days we have a different teacher talking about astrology, cosmology, geomancy, food, plants. The plants that we're going to be working with this particular year are going to be mistletoe and ivy, which interestingly, both have highly anti-parasitic qualities, which I think is an interesting reminder to do a final cleanse, to make sure that when we enter into our dream space, that we're not carrying other energies with us. But interestingly, they're both considered to have very, very high possibility of anti-cancerous healing abilities. But most incredibly, they're both linked very deeply to Dionysus and fertility. So it didn't matter what way I came into this whole process of looking at the solstice, it always seemed to come back to fertility, planting seeds, womb space, fire, light, and kicking on from that space. So that's really what this journey is all about, Pam. And with your permission, I'd like to share a special discount actually for this journey that starts on December the 12th. For all of your audience.
I stop sharing screen here, David?
Yes, please do. I think we finished on the astrology there as we enter into the final few minutes. And yeah, for those of you who are looking for an alternative Christmas with like-minded people who want to hold the space for the light to take into that space, so that we can really manifest everything that Pam's been talking about, not just today, but really for the last few years since this whole kind of hoo-ha started, really, I guess, and we kind of got more clarity of what was going on. But also as long-time listeners, and in fact, most of our community, Pam, have come to us through doing the videos with you. So I want to say a huge thank you that our community really exists, largely because of the videos I've done with you. So I want to offer that opportunity to all of your audience to join us, and I'll put in the show notes a special PAMG20 coupon code you can use for a 20% discount. But really inviting many of you who feel the inclination to be in a container space with a group and to hold that light, I think, that you were talking about so beautifully at the beginning, Pam, because this is a time when we're calling the light back in and taking the time out to recognize that the solar energy, that spark of fire, is returning to us, because we need it. We need it in that womb space. So I think that's really beautiful. And I think that in many ways that sort of brings us to a conclusion for today. But do you have anything in response to all of that as a sort of a wraparound?
Yeah, the only thing, you know, when you were talking there, David, about the connection to the earth and the connection to the cosmos, that's so much, I think, the theme of many of the dwarf planets. This deep, ancient reconnection to Mother Gaia, and yet at the same time, because so many of them in myth were creator gods, bringing us out to the heavens, the cosmos, reminding us that we are one consciousness with all the other galactic beings. And that's really exciting, really exciting. So I think we have if we keep our focus correctly on love, joy, compassion, peace, healing, integrity, we're going to be fine. That's where we're headed.
I think that's so beautiful that, you know, many of these newly discovered KBOs and dwarf planets, they do carry the energy of creator gods and goddesses. And I think that it's worth reminding ourselves that we too also carry that energy within us. We are cosmic beings carrying divine codes of angels and unicorns and, you know, winged lions and you know, great felines and many different cosmic codes, all of which are connected to our sort of cosmic ancestors through the constellations like the Nibiruans, the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Arcturians. And so this is just a different, you know, emphasis of how do we start to re-understand, how did we get here? What's the journey my soul took before I became David? Because it's all part of me. It didn't just stop at the end of the last life. It's still somehow going on a parallel timeline, and it's manifesting for me here. And I think if we can come to that place that you just said of remembering that we have access to this godlike creation energy, then the world is truly our oyster. We become like the chalice. We become the personification of the Mary and Jesus energy, which is kind of, you know, the return of the Son of God. You know, that's Jesus. And it's the Christ consciousness that we can all connect to through the balancing of our yin and yang, masculine, solar, lunar, internal, external energies. And the more that we have that in balance, the more we can be in a place of clarity, authenticity to do the creations that we want. And I think there's just a beautiful opportunity here at this time of year. So I want to thank you, Pam, for joining me to do this preview. I want to thank all of your audience for always listening to me and sometimes struggling with my language a little bit. So I just want to share a small hint that me and Pam talked about. If you are not a native English speaker and watching this video on YouTube, there are two little buttons in the bottom right-hand corner of your YouTube image that you can click on. The first says CC, which is closed captions, which means that you will get all of what we're talking about appear as a language at the bottom. But there's also another one that looks a bit like a cog, which is the settings. If you hit that button, it comes up with the option to auto translate, and you can get translated subtitles into almost any language. I don't know how good they are across the board, but they're okay in English and Spanish. And you can watch any video you want, whether it's me and Pam talking in English, but you can have subtitles in your own language. And that actually applies to pretty much all YouTube videos. So I know that not that many people know about that, because I didn't know about it until quite recently either. But also just to share, for those of you interested in what we're doing over at QPH, quantumplanethealing.com and quantumplanet.world, we actually have both of our sites translated into Spanish. So you can switch between the sites and watch videos with Spanish subtitles. So anyway, a little hint for all of you out there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Pam, and we'll put all of the links and codes and stuff in the show notes, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again in the new year, Pam. Looking forward to a wonderful Yule, wonderful Christmas, wishing you that Santa brings the very, very best of whatever your heart desires down the chimney for your return of the light, and for each and every one of you out there as well. And hopefully some of you will feel inclined to join us and hold that space for the return of the light over the next couple of weeks. So without further ado, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pam, and we'll see you all again very soon. Ciao for now.
Lots of love, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of January and the new moon that we have coming up in Capricorn on the 2nd, very, very early in the year. Just before I get to the astrology, more housekeeping. Just to let you know, on Instagram, I have nothing. I haven't been active on Instagram for years, nor do I plan to be. So the 12 accounts on Instagram with my photograph and my name are all fake, all scams. On YouTube, I think there are now 7 scam channels. There is Astrology, Astrology TV, Pam Gregory Classic, Pam Gregory Classics, B0, and another 2 have joined recently of Special Message and Pam Gregory Prophecy. I don't ever believe I prophesy anything, so rather overblown title. All of those 7 channels are scam, fake. So best idea, just to stick to this one. Don't reward the scammers. Just stick to this channel. This is my only official YouTube channel. So thanks so much for your understanding with all of that and all your wonderful support as well. Let's talk about moving into 2022. I think this is going to be a very different year energetically to the last 2 that we've had. The last 2 have been extremely contracted. We've been locked down for a lot of the time. We've had a lot of rules and regulations, and that was really all started at the beginning of 2020. 12th of January 2020, we had that very important Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and that was really the beginning of the hard times, the increased control, the austerity. However, as we shift into 2022, things feel quite different, really. I think it's going to be action-packed, very eventful, dramatic, unstable, yes, absolutely. But a feeling of speed and a feeling of, as the old falls away, we have much more opportunity to birth something new. And an alternative society is already being birthed. It is already happening. You may already be involved in groups that are actually doing this because they're all over the world. Because as the falling away of the old creates a vacuum, something else steps in that is going to be so much better. Now, I'm probably going to do a separate video on the big themes for 2022, but just to touch on those here, one of the big themes I think is all through 2021, we've had a square between Saturn and Uranus. And really through this year, Saturn has had the upper hand. So Saturn is about government rules and regulations, control, doing things for your safety, doing things that are really related to the past, the way they've always been. But Uranus is very different. Uranus is the future, it's the truth, it's awakening, it's not obeying the rules, it's breaking free, being independent, but it is always encouraging us to a higher state of being. Now, I feel that as we turn the corner of this year, go over the pivot of the seesaw, that Uranus will start to have the upper hand. And I feel that for many reasons that I'll cover in a separate video. But that will create a very different energy because it is unstable, it's unexpected, lots of shocks and surprises. I've called next year revelations and revolutions, and that's how I think it will be, because the revelations are coming out thick and fast now because Uranus is very related to the truth, and the revelations prompt the revolutions. We're going to see way more. We've seen an awful lot in particularly 2021 of riots, protests, peaceful demonstrations. I think we're going to see a great deal more in 2022. So that's one of the big differences, I think. Another difference is the nodes in January are moving from Gemini, Sagittarius, where they've been for the last 18 months, into Taurus, Scorpio for the next 18 months. So in this last month of the South Node being in Sagittarius, really our old belief systems are crumbling. The South Node is our collective past, what we're letting fall away, if you like. And that's very connected to our old belief systems. New belief systems are being born. And again, I'll talk in more detail about this in future, but the nodal axis in North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio, a lot about the economy, finances, currencies, the earth, nature, loans, mortgages, debts, defaults, taxes, that kind of thing. South Node in Scorpio is related to secrets, sexual secrets, financial secrets, particularly of the rich and powerful, coming out. And it's interesting, if you think of Scorpio as the symbolized by the scorpion, it's often related to poisons and toxins. Poisons and toxins. Again, secrets coming out about poisons and toxins. I think that's going to be a big part of this. So another important trend next year that is new is Jupiter moving into Pisces. It does this on the 29th of December. It races through Pisces, and by the 11th of May, it has moved into Aries. Normally, Jupiter spends a year in a sign. So it's moving super quickly. And it then, in late October, backtracks again into Pisces until the end of 2022. So there's some big differences. But as I say, I'll talk about those in more detail as we move through. Now, I think a very positive beginning to the year is on the 1st of January, we have the Sun trine Uranus. Uranus is our future. Uranus is the galactic. Uranus is awakening. Uranus is a higher state of being. It's our superconscious. Uranus always wants to shift us away from dense 3D reality of Saturn because it orbits beyond the realm of Saturn. So yes, it's fast change. Yes, it's the unexpected. Yes, it's sudden, but it's different energy. It's moving us forwards. So let's now talk about the new moon, which happens very early in the year on the 2nd of January. So this is the first new moon of the year and is therefore very important. So let me put my glasses on and share my screen for this. So again, I've set this chart for London, for the UK time zone, because that's where I live. If you're not in the UK time zone, ignore the houses, ignore the angles, the clock face of the chart, because you'd have to adjust that to make it relevant for your location. So all we're looking at is the planets in the signs and their aspect to each other. So this happens on the 2nd. As I say, it happens at 10:34 a.m. Pacific and 6:34 p.m. UK time. Now, the sun and moon are always together at a new moon. So the sun and moon here at 12:20 of Capricorn, this is very strong initiatory energy. This is cardinal earth. And what Capricorn is excellent at is setting a goal and achieving it. It's excellent at manifesting, always delivering against its goals. So here we can set a new intention for wherever 12 Capricorn falls in our chart. What is the new intention you want to set? What new seed do you want to plant in your own life? And what is the new intention you want to set for New Earth? Let's do that every month. So we're building energy into New Earth. Very important aspect here is that Mars is right on the Great Attractor. The Great Attractor is at 14 degrees of Sagittarius. And I've talked about this recently with the lunar eclipse, but the Great Attractor is this massive gravitational anomaly in space. It's like a gigantic cosmic vacuum cleaner. It is moving backwards at 600 kilometers a second, and it sucks galaxies in its wake. And we, on little planet Earth, are in one of those galaxies that is being sucked along by the Great Attractor. So it is intensely powerful cosmic and galactic energy. And when a planet aligns with these points, like the Great Attractor or the galactic center or supergalactic center, etc., it allows alignment, it allows downloads, if you like, of much higher consciousness energy. So this is extremely positive again here. What I find fascinating here is that the sun and moon at 12 of Capricorn are actually at the midpoint of Pluto, 25 of Capricorn, and a dwarf planet called Ixion. I haven't drawn Ixion in, but it's at 1 degree of Capricorn, so it's about here. So this new moon is at the midpoint of Pluto and Ixion. Now, Pluto, as we know, is about top-down systems, particularly governmental systems, large corporations, institutions. And Pluto, moving through these last few degrees of Capricorn until 2024, when it finally exits, is about unearthing any corruption or lack of integrity, lack of transparency, etc. I've talked about this many times. That's its process. Ixion, the dwarf planet, is known as the lawless brother of Pluto. It doesn't have a great reputation because in myth, Ixion was a king, so a king, a leader, and instead of buying expensive bridal gifts for his father-in-law, he decided to murder his father-in-law. So crimes against humanity, if you like. And Zeus, king of the gods, gave Ixion a second chance to be reinstated, as it were. But Ixion rather messed up that opportunity too, because he tried to rape Zeus's wife, Hera, and was then spun off into eternity. So really, Ixion is to do with being completely lawless and amoral, committing crimes against whomever, against the gods, breaking spiritual law, if you like. This to me is absolutely fascinating. Ixion does have a very different level. Every planet, every dwarf planet has different levels of lower and higher expression. And with Ixion, the higher level of expression is finding your bliss, breaking away from the mainstream and finding your bliss. And may I suggest that a lot of people are already doing that. So this is super interesting. I think that's a very powerful part of this new moon. Another thing that is very important, I've been talking about this quite a bit recently, is that Venus, now retrograde from the 19th of December, is conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. Venus will stay retrograde until the 29th of January. It was last exactly conjunct Pluto on Christmas Day, and it will finally come again to exactly conjunct Pluto on the 3rd of March, and then gradually exit from Capricorn. But this is a very strong signature, as you all know from my recent videos around the economy, banking, currencies, finances, and a whole, this is birthing a new financial system, essentially. It's going to collapse the old system, it's going to birth a new. And actually, I shouldn't just say financial system singular, because I think there will be systems plural. Because Uranus in Taurus is promising lots of different, be it cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies, that are more decentralized and independent. Although obviously there's a move towards making everything centralized, in that every central bank apparently now has its own cryptocurrency, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. So because we are already within the energy of the US Pluto return, and I have a separate video on that, where Pluto in its orbit comes back for the first time to its so-called natal position in 1776, and that in the US chart is in the second house of the economy, the US economy, which will ripple across the world. I think it's inevitable somewhere between now and February, when that Pluto return becomes exact and continues operational for the following 2 years, that we are going to see some economic turbulence for sure. But that is a breaking down of the old in order to move to better systems. Venus-Pluto can also make us feel intense emotions, and these can be intense emotions around a past relationship. Somebody from your past may turn up. It can be obsessive, intense emotions about a new relationship equally. But I think one of the things that is most interesting about this conjunction at this new moon is that Venus at 22-23 of Capricorn is within 22 minutes, it's at the same degree within 22 minutes of that Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened on the 12th of January 2020 that initiated this whole pandemic, that was about hard times, excessive control, etc., overreach of government. So for me, this is, and because it's a new moon in Capricorn, sign of government, top-down authority, this is an extremely interesting point for Venus to be at, particularly because she's retrograde. So this is like a revisiting back to that same degree of whatever was initiated at that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So what I think this is about is, let's go back over what governments have been doing, how they've handled the pandemic over the last 2 years. How well has that worked for people, etc. I think that's going to be extremely interesting. So, and often hard aspect, and this conjunction is a hard aspect between Venus and Pluto, is to do with issues around betrayal as well. So, and that can be on an individual level. You might be having a sense of betrayal in a personal relationship, or it can be globally. We're having a sense of betrayal in a widespread collective sense. These last few degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, particularly Capricorn, are going to be very, very activated in your chart. So if you have a sense of intensity here, that's what is unearthing it. And what it's about as well, and I've referred to this a couple of times, is Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, through the overreach of various governments, is helping us to see or teach us that we must come back to our inner authority, rather than, as we have through our lives, very probably all of us have been referring to external authorities, governments, etc. big institutions, corporations. So it's going to be a turning in. We're going to be learning some new inner skills in our own sense of sovereignty and our power. It's an inside job, if you like. Now, what is really very positive as well here, I mentioned that the sun was trying to Uranus on the 1st of January, but still here on the 2nd. Uranus is trine to the sun and moon. So this is super. Again, this is expanding us out to the truth, to a bigger galaxy, a bigger cosmos, to our awakening. It's stepping up our consciousness to this higher state of being. It can bring in, again, because it's in Taurus, which is linked to the economy, currencies, etc., innovation and new technology in those areas as well. It's always linked to the galactic information. As we're moving from being little citizens on planet Earth to stepping into, I want to say, galactic remembrance, because that's where we've come from originally. We've just forgotten it. Remember always that Uranus is the unexpected. It's related to coronal mass ejections, solar storms, solar flashes, all of those things. All of those sudden extreme Earth events are going to be writ large through 2022. And I can't tell you when they're going to happen, because Uranus is always the planet of surprises. We'll never quite know, but we will be seeing a lot of it. Another aspect of interest is that Chiron at 8 of Aries is square to the sun and moon, 12 of Capricorn. So this is issues, not surprisingly, around sickness and health coming in here, but also new initiatives. This is a new moon, and Chiron is always also about healing. So are we going to see some new healing solutions coming in at this time, which are going to kind of break us forward out of the pandemic that we've had for pretty much 2 years now? Another very positive aspect, Jupiter has recently, 29th of December, moved into Pisces, where it will stay, as I mentioned, till the 11th of May. And this is in an out of sign square, T-square, in fact, to the nodal axis. Because the nodal axis is across here. This chart is showing it just as squeaking into late Taurus, Scorpio. It's kind of on the edge of Gemini, Sagittarius, Taurus, Scorpio, but Jupiter squaring that, our future collective destiny, the North Node, is similar to Uranus in a way. It's the future. It's linked to truth in its rulership of Sagittarius around the law. It is 2022 is a year of dreaming big. Jupiter in Pisces, dream big, have bigger dreams than you have ever had, ever in your lifetime. Partly as the old collapses, we're going to have a vacuum to allow us that opportunity. But that Jupiter in Pisces, particularly when it comes together with Neptune, and I'll be talking much more about this later, is going to magnify our manifesting abilities in a way we've never experienced. I mean, big time. So get your dreaming hat on now. What do you want to dream in that has never been possible before? Because that's going to be possible in 2022, and we're going to make it happen. If we move beyond the new moon, and I'll stop sharing screen now. If we move beyond the new moon, we will see the moon aspecting the Uranus-Saturn square on the 4th, and by the 9th, it is highlighting the Eris-Pluto square. I want to say about the Eris-Pluto square that has been operational for the last 2 years and continues to be so all through 2022. But don't forget, and sometimes I mention it, sometimes I don't, that it's actually a T-square, because Eris is opposing Haumea, late degrees of Libra, and Pluto is squaring her. She is an incredibly creative, regenerative energy. She can regenerate the earth, even when it appears to be hopeless and just laid waste and dead and toxic. She's one of the most powerful symbols for New Earth. So as Eris is creating in its feisty street fighter mode, archetype, the collapse of the old, Humeur, is right there, creating the new, creating something magical, shamanic, deeply connected to nature, quantum, really beautiful. And I'm getting very interested, as you know, in these Kuiper Belt objects, these dwarf planets. I'm going to be talking a lot more about them through 2022. Ixion is one of those that I've just been talking about. So the next thing to look at in this first half is that on the 10th, Eris moves stationary direct at 2341 of Aries. Now we will feel this a good week to either side. It moves stationary direct. Whenever planets move in either direction, it's like a big, big ship turning around. They kind of drill down on that 1 degree. And so we're going to feel the symbolism of Eris strongly week to either side. So we know she's the feisty street fighter. We know she's the female awakener. We know she's the goddess of discord and chaos in order to break through to something better. She will not tolerate inequality and injustice in society. Her whole impulse is that everyone has to be included, nobody marginalized. She's also, don't forget, the patron saint of chaotic creation. She's going to help us create something amazing. These dwarf planets, as I've mentioned, represent a higher level of consciousness for us. We're moving beyond all our kind of bread and butter planets, if you like, that we've used for so long, and we're adding in another layer of consciousness. And Eris is very powerfully part of that mix. Then on the 18th, Uranus moves stationary direct. Again, magnified a week to either side. And as I've mentioned in the past, Uranus' symbol is quite similar to Eris. They're both planets of awakening. They're planets of revolution, rebellion, demanding equality. So all of these things, truth, demanding truth, all of these things, including the earthquakes, the volcanoes, the shocks, the coronal mass ejection, all of those things, cyber attacks, all of those things potentially are going to be strongly felt around the 18th. And I'm going to talk more about that, of course, in the next video, because I'm just tipping over the midpoint of the month. But we're also tipping over the midpoint of the seesaw, because we're moving from this 2 years of very strong contraction and just warmth over that pivot point of the seesaw, and the energy becomes very different. It becomes, yes, unstable, yes, a bit of a wild ride, yes, ground falling away from beneath our feet, yes, relentless, fast pace. We can all barely catch our breath in doing this. And from the 29th of January, when Venus moves direct, all of the planets are moving direct until the end of April. So we're going to have this strong sense of momentum, very strong. And remember that Jupiter is racing through Pisces during that period until the 11th of May. So I think we are going to see so much happening in our world. It's going to be, as I say, dramatic, very colorful, very eventful. Don't make your focal point those outer events. Keep bringing yourself back to your anchor, and make your anchor something instant, free, simple, that you can do anytime. I mean, just remember the baby belly breath that I've talked about. Just shut your eyes, focus 100% on your breath, 100%. You are nothing but the breath. Clear the mind. And you just gradually allow the breath to breathe you, allow the breath to happen. And very softly, just allow the exhale to become longer than the inhale. Just allow that to happen. Just drop into that breath like butter melting in the sun. And within seconds, you are lowering your cortisol levels, your stress levels, your anxiety levels. So your anchor and your center is yourself. This is something we're really going to learn, because we are creating all of the time. We are co-creating with the energy of the universe. And we do that in a fairly unconscious, shambolic way generally. Just thoughts rummaging through our heads. We're not aware, we're not very conscious of our thoughts, which are electrical impulse, and our feelings that are magnetic wave. It just kind of jumbles through us. And so part of 2022 is helping us to be much more conscious of our thoughts and our emotions and kind of take command of them. Decide to dominate your reality with the frequency you choose. Is it love? Is it joy? Is it freedom? Is it compassion? And it doesn't have to be overexcited. It can be peace. Peace is a high frequency emotion. But when we're co-creating in a kind of random, jumbly kind of way, the structures that we're creating, the geometry that we're creating with the plasma is everywhere. It's just kind of electromagnetically charged ether, if you like, but it forms geometry in that plasma. And if we are incoherent, particularly when we're in low frequency emotions like anger, fear, hate, we get incoherent geometry. It's like interference on a television set. It's not going to produce a beautiful result because everything in the universe is a frequency match. So if we can feel more coherent emotions, which are always higher frequency ones of love, joy, peace, laughter, compassion, gratitude, appreciation, they form coherent geometry in the plasma, almost like this energetic scaffolding that's been built in the plasma. And as we start to add to that, and it's even stronger if we can do this collectively, if we can start to add to that scaffolding, that architecture, we are pulling into reality much more quickly and much more powerfully and much more positively an amazing new earth. I mean, Lynn McTaggart has done some wonderful work on this, as you know. Read her latest book, Power of Eight. Even with a group of 8, you can do this much more powerfully than just doing it on your own. But if you're in a community, a group of like-minded people, even if you don't know the detail, come together focused on these beautiful high-frequency energies and the geometry that we're creating in the plasma is coherent. It's much more symmetrical. Think of Masaru, Dr. Emoto's beautiful symmetrical ice crystals when people directed positive love, positive emotion to the water. I mean, you can find that online very easily, and you can find what was produced when negative emotion was directed at water and then it was frozen, the ugly, asymmetrical, distorted patterns versus the exquisite, symmetrical, beautiful, really beautiful patterns that were created simply by directing positive emotion to water. And think how much our bodies are made up of water. So I hope that's helped you. So 2022 is going to be a wild ride, but it's going to be a ride where we start to step into our sovereignty, where our authority, our power, and start possibly for the first time ever in our lives to really feel that and to see it operating as we pull in through our focus, our intentions, a much, much better new earth. Hope that's helped you. Tons to say about the second half of January, and I'll also, as I say, in the coming weeks, do a more general one on 2022 as well. Hope that's helped you. If you don't know where these aspects fall in your chart, you can download a free birth chart from my website and go to the link in the description. You can buy a 2-part tutorial video series that can explain how you find these points in your chart and what the meaning is for you in your life that you can use for any update I do. If you want more information about my books, my teaching videos, my newsletter, etc., just check out my website, pamgregory.com. Thanks so much for listening. God bless. Bye for now. Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of March and the new moon that we have coming up in Aries on the 24th, but I'm also going to be talking about some of the longer term trends that are emerging this month for 2020. Now, we've had this huge emphasis of planets in Capricorn, and indeed Mars joined the party on the 16th of February. Now, Capricorn is a great place for Mars to be. It's known as its sign of exaltation. It's going to be staying there until the last day of March when it moves into Aquarius. But this is Capricorn energy with Mars there is great for setting goals, achieving them, driving projects forward. Capricorn is the sign of manifestation par excellence. So this is a very positive place for Mars to be. But it is also in this second half of March re-energizing the planetary placements that were there in January. So you remember that we astrologers were talking at great length about this bunching up of planets in Capricorn in January. We had Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Ceres, South Node, and Mars is going to be tracking over, making conjunctions to all of those positions that we had in January. So for instance, on the 19th of March, which is the Aries equinox, Mars is going to be coming to 22 degrees of Capricorn, exactly where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was. It's going to be at 22 degrees of Capricorn for the 19th and the 20th of the month. But because it's happening at the Aries equinox, whenever we have an equinox or a solstice, it's like striking a tuning fork for the next 3 months. It sets up a context or certain themes for the following 3 months. So this is very much going to be re-triggering that whole theme in January, which, as I've spoken before, one of the big themes is about right use of power or abuse of power. I think we're seeing that in the world very clearly. You may be seeing it in your personal lives, that the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, Capricorn is about top-down power. We're seeing more autocracy in the world. We're seeing more extreme leadership in many countries. But equally, that is happening as part of the collapse of the old order, because if any corruption emerges from those top-down governments, leaders, etc., then ultimately it is the collapse of the old paradigm that won't happen quickly necessarily. Pluto stays in Capricorn until 2024, but I think it's very clear as to the process that we're seeing, that where leadership or governments or big institutions lack integrity and accountability, they will be found wanting, and eventually that will corrode the power longer term over the next few years. So Mars is going to energize that process. So right use and abuse of power energized through particularly the second half of March. So Mars comes to 22 of Capricorn on the 19th and 20th. It then, between really up until the 23rd, it comes to conjunct Jupiter, Pluto, and also Eris in their current positions. It also, by the last day of March 31st, it comes to conjunct Saturn at 0 of Aquarius, because Saturn, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, is moving into Aquarius in the last week of March. So taking those one by one, Saturn conjunct Jupiter. Now this can bring rewards, it can bring a lot of success for you. So see where these degrees, particularly 22 to 24 of Capricorn, are falling in your chart, because this can be a very positive time for you with this Mars-Jupiter conjunction. It's driving projects forward as well. Then on the 22nd and 23rd of the month, Mars is coming to conjunct Pluto. That gives tremendous focus, but it can also be very aggressive action. It can be lording things over other people, or might makes right. When Mars eventually comes to conjunct Saturn at the end of the month, that is very good for discipline and long-term focus on a project. But taken all together, this is really replaying January. Mars will energize those planetary positions in January and those themes. Jupiter, for the second half of March, is also just moving between 22 and 24 of Capricorn. Those same degrees again. So Jupiter will expand whatever was happening. So what all this means personally for you, and we're, as I say, we're going to see this playing out in the world in a significant way, it means that whatever was happening for you in January is likely to be happening in a stronger and a bigger way in this second half of March. Okay, so see where particularly the last 10 degrees of Capricorn are falling in your chart, which house area, which area of life. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. You can check out this link above. That will take you to my store, and you can buy a 2-part tutorial video series that will explain how to find these positions in your chart. And I'm currently giving the meaning for you. But what's important as well, if we're thinking of a longer term theme, is whatever you were doing, what you were involved with in January in that area of life, as I say, is going to be repeating in a bigger, stronger, louder way in the second half of March. But this is also the setup, what is also going to develop for you in the second half of 2020. Because when Mars is coming to conjunct Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, etc., the conjunction between two planets is always the beginning of a new cycle, the seed point. In the second half of 2020, Mars is going to be moving into its own warrior sign of Aries and squaring all of those planets that it's going to be conjuncting in March. So the square is always the test point of the conjunction. So whatever you're doing in March, which is an echo of what was happening for you in January, is also a setup for the second half of 2020 for you. So not only look to those last degrees of where Capricorn's falling in your chart, if we're thinking longer term, see where those the second half of Aries is falling in your chart, because that area is going to be activated for you as well. And I'd really say here that it's important not to act in any extreme way or overblown way. You might be feeling as if you want to react strongly, you want to react angrily, you want to react impulsively, or you want to take some kind of very assertive action. It's really important at this time that you don't act in an extreme way, because it's important to be measured, to be cautious, to take a breath, take a step back, be mindful of your actions, your behavior, because it's going to set up how things play out for you in the second half of 2020. I hope that's clear. Okay, let's talk about Saturn now. Saturn moves into Aquarius on the 22nd of March. It stays there until the 2nd of July. It doesn't go beyond 2 degrees of Aquarius. And then it backtracks into Capricorn until December, when it moves fully into Aquarius with Jupiter. And they will both be traveling in Aquarius through 2021 and beyond for Saturn. Okay, Aquarius is an air sign. So this Saturn moving into Aquarius will give us another glimpse of what may be happening further down the road when it fully moves into Aquarius, December and into 2021. Now, we had our first glimpse with the new moon in Aquarius on the 24th of January. What was happening in the world around about that time? Well, one of the big things that was happening, coronavirus was coming into our consciousness in a big way by late January. Coronavirus is airborne. Aquarius is air. So airborne things may become a bigger issue, or it may be the continuation of the coronavirus issue, as Saturn is in Aquarius from late March through to 2nd of July. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Uranus is the planet which is most linked to aviation. So what's happening with travel and flights? Well, Saturn is the planet of constriction, contraction, limitation, rules and regulations. So what's happening? A lot of the flights are being cancelled now. Travel is becoming more limited because people are cancelling flights because of coronavirus, or airlines are cancelling flights. And Saturn's endeavour is always to put walls, borders, boundaries, territorial divisions, quarantines, containment to stop the virus. But coronavirus is airborne, so it doesn't necessarily respect territorial divisions. Right at the end of March, we have Mars coming to conjunct Saturn, 0 of Aquarius, and that's quite militaristic. So we may see stronger, almost more military measures around borders to try and stop the virus entering certain countries. However, Aquarius has it's the most futuristic sign. It has a wonderful side, the most futuristic sign of all. And with Aquarius and Uranus that rules it, things are never linear. They're never gradual. They take quantum leaps into the future. Now, Aquarius, as I've mentioned before, is the outsider, the maverick, the alien. And we know already that for a couple of years now that because of the drop in the magnetic shield around the Earth, and this is measurable, you can easily find this on the internet, a lot more galactic and cosmic energies are coming into our Earth plane, and that is in part contributing to these jumps in consciousness that people are experiencing right now. It's something we've never known in our lifetime. We've always been protected in space by this area known as the magnetic cloud, and our entire solar system is spinning out of that. So we're moving into an unknown, if you like, unfamiliar area of space, allowing very new energies to come in. That is wonderful for our collective evolution. So jumps in consciousness, jumps in energy are very likely at this time. Uranus is the planet linked to Kundalini energy. We may see some big developments in our third eye, opening much more, which may have been quite limited up in our lifetime up to now. But again, it's the quantum leap. Uranus is connected to downloads and insights and flashes of futuristic information. Saturn in this sign, Saturn is to do with the bones, the body's skeleton, the body's teeth, the structure. So we may even see some evolutionary developments in our physical structure. We may see physical upgrades connected to our bones or our DNA to enable us to accommodate these higher level futuristic energies that are coming in for us. So I can barely find the vocabulary for this, but we may be seeing big developments physically and in our consciousness coming in very rapidly, because Uranus and Aquarius are always linked to speed and jumps over 2020, but particularly getting into 2021 and beyond. We could be evolving in ways that we never believed possible. I feel this is almost like a Christopher Columbus moment as well, where we've known our Earth and we thought we knew our place in the galaxy, and all of a sudden, and it may happen in these few months when Saturn's in Aquarius, it may not happen till later in the year, but I think we're going to start to see glimpses of all of a sudden we get a bigger understanding of our reality and the universe in which we operate, which is way beyond what we ever imagined up to now. And as I say, I haven't even got the vocabulary for that now, but I kind of sense it coming down the road. So this is very exciting and very positive for you. So we may even, with these jumps in consciousness, start to discover or rediscover abilities and skills that we may have had as ancient but highly evolved people in the past. Telepathy is something I mentioned last time. So be aware of that, and also be aware of this shift of density, this shift from permanence to, as I've often mentioned, permanent home ownership, car ownership, job for life. We're going to be shifting from that sense of permanence to something which is much more transient, much more exciting, to do with experiences, to do with connecting to other people of like mind. Then we have our new moon on the 24th of the month. This is happening at 4 degrees and 12 minutes of Aries. It's happening at 2:28 a.m. Pacific and 9:28 p.m. UK time. Now, this is the 6th month in a row that we have had a new moon at 4 degrees of its sign. So that really does emphasize this new paradigm that we're shifting into. New moons are always a new beginning. So a great time to set a new intention for what you want to manifest in this area of life. See where 4 degrees of Aries is falling in your chart. But because Mars is in its own sign here, and Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, there really is a feeling of a new beginning. Aries energy is initiatory, it's pioneering, it's entrepreneurial, it can go solo. So there is a kind of surge of, in the Northern Hemisphere, this is our spring really beginning, this surge of fresh new energy that can create a new beginning, a new start for you in this area of life. So see where that's being activated for you. Now, this is a really lovely new moon. We still have a lot of cardinal energy here. We still have our Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, South Node in Capricorn. We've got the Sun, the Moon, always together at a new moon, plus Chiron within a degree, and Eris all in Aries. So again, we've still got this strong cardinality, get the show on the road, making things happen energy. But what is really lovely about this new moon, apart from this fresh, vigorous energy, forward momentum, is that Mercury at 6 of Pisces, Mars at 4 of Taurus are in a tight sextile, and that means that the Sun and Moon and Chiron are at the midpoint of Mercury and Uranus. Now, this can bring in some brilliant and original thinking, out of the box thinking, futuristic thinking, downloads, mind of God connections. And because Chiron is within 1 degree, Chiron's at 5 of Aries, and the Sun Moon at 4 degrees of Aries, and they are all 3 of them square to the nodal axis at 4 degrees of Cancer, Capricorn. This really is still talking about illness happening in the world, but with this brilliant thinking that we have coming in here, and also together with the fact this new moon is in Aries, together with newness, new ideas, we could see some new ways of thinking about coronavirus, some new healings, some new solutions perhaps. But also this brilliant original thinking is going to apply to your own personal life as well, your own projects, your own inventions. So very positive, this new moon. Don't forget to set your new intention. In addition to that, we have Venus in the last week of March. It's exact on the 28th. It's going to be in a trine to Jupiter and Pluto in late Capricorn. It's going to be at 24 of Taurus in a trine to Jupiter, Pluto in late Capricorn. Now, this can be wonderful for bringing success for you, bringing rewards and bringing recognition. And that can either happen around the house area, the area of life where 24 of Taurus is sitting in your chart, or it can happen where late Capricorn is in your chart. So very positive. For the whole second half of March, Jupiter is going to be conjunct Pluto. It isn't exact until the 5th of April, and indeed we get 3 conjunctions in 2020, in April, June and November. But it isn't exact, as I say, till 5th of April. But nevertheless, it is technically conjunct. Now, this to me is about big money, big power emerging even more strongly in the world, and therefore inequality of those people who don't have big money and big power. But Jupiter will also enlarge, if you like, and accelerate this deconstruction process and transformation that Pluto is taking us through. So it will accelerate potentially the dysfunction, the crumbling of the old paradigm in all the very obvious chaotic ways we're seeing it in the world, because it has to break it down completely, like the tree falling in the wood and rotting down completely before it can start to provide new soil for new life. So Jupiter may accelerate that process, and therefore we may be starting to see, even bigger events happening in the world. So don't worry about that. Know that is part of the process. And also, I would say, with any coronavirus worries, try not to go into fear. Fear reduces your immune system. It contracts your DNA. Really stay strong in your thinking and stay as healthy and positive as you can, and feeling that
you can almost feel invincible. You can develop your sparkly white shiny bubble around you energetically and really feel invincible, and that will literally strengthen you physically too. The other important aspect to talk about is that Saturn already has come into an out of sign square with Uranus. Now, when Saturn enters Aquarius on the 22nd of March and stays up to the 2nd of July, just to 2 degrees of Aquarius and not beyond, it will be not in an exact square. The exact square won't happen until February 2021, but it is in a pretty tight square. Now, this is often a signature for financial and stock market volatility. So even in the first week of March, we saw huge volatility on the stock markets. We saw a drop of 1 week, I think it was the first week of March, we saw a drop of up to 13% in some stock market indices, massive as a result of the coronavirus. So we are going to see that wild ride, very likely from now till early July, and again returning later in the year into 2021. So again, be prepared for that. Don't go into fear and take whatever actions are relevant for you. But as I always say, the bigger the outer events in the world, the more turbulent they are. And we're going to have a lot of outer action in 2020 because it's such a year of transition and transformation. Turn inwards. Don't let your reference point be outer. Make your reference point inner. Turn into that hub of the wheel and even create, it's a beautiful thing to create in your inner sanctuary, as it were, either a place that you know and love or a place that you imagine. It can be the top of a mountain, it can be at a lakeside, it can be in a deep forest, it can be in a field full of sunflowers or poppies or whatever you want to invent, but that becomes your go-to place. That becomes your go-to sanctuary that you can instantly fall back into, and that will nourish you, sustain you, and bring about this feeling of peace, calm, and that stillness, that permanent sense of still being that is always there. If we can drop into the now, that is where our power lies. If we can withdraw all our focus on the outer world and know that that pillar of silent strength in the now is always there for us, the permanent, ever-present now, in our beautiful sanctuary that we've created visually, that will serve us exceptionally well as we go through 2020. So a lot happening in this second half. We've got a fabulous surging forward, new beginning, new moon on the 24th in Aries. We've got some very strong cardinal energy with a replay of January, but also a setup for the second half of 2020. And remember not to act in an extreme or assertive way. Take a step back, take a breath before any actions or behaviours that you might come to regret a little later on. So I hope that's been helpful for you. If you'd like more information about my books or my teaching videos or even my monthly newsletter, please just check out my website, pamgregory.com. And thanks so much for listening, and bye for now.